The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I would like to say that I support, without qualification, exception, or amendment, the 4 bills which we are debating today as a compendium of bills. The Evidence Amendment Number 2 bill, the Abolition of Mandatory Minimum Sentencing, the Bail Amendment Act, and the Coroner's Amendment Bill. As a practitioner, I've had experience with all of them. As an advocate for the administration of justice, I've had something to say on all of them, and perhaps will have some expanded comments to make later in the intervention. But I wanted to say that I support them, again, without qualification and without amendment. This evening, at the Sandlands Primary School, we expect a wonderful treat because the Member of Parliament for Angliston, my cousin, is coming up to Fox Hill to talk this evening to the Fox Hill branch there, about the amendments to the Constitution. And I would like especially to invite all the women in the constituency to be there. I've said to the Member of Parliament, all the female members of Parliament, that as a male I can quite smugly sit back and do nothing with regard to this amendment. Mm-hmm. This amendment is about women and equality for women. Yes. And to do not let these wicked old men try and deflect you from that fact. There are 15,000 more women on the rolls than are men. And the only people who have something to say about this bill every day are men, talking about this, that, and the next. So I'm saying, stick to your guns and vote yes. So I'm asking all the women to turn out and get themselves organized on this. Mr. Speaker, the Member of Parliament for Montague raised the question of work permits for Dominicans in particular. It has been the policy, and it has been announced that because there was a big public back and forth with someone who owns an operation called Geneva Brass, I believe. And the work permits for, I believe, for non-nationals, I'm not sure the national, I believe they were Dominicans, were all refused. And it has been the policy of this administration since 2012 that all of those applications are refused. Not just for fishing, because the law does not allow non-Bahamians to fish by license in this country, but even where someone purports to be an engineer or they come up with all kinds of inventive things like mechanic or air conditioning maintenance operator or any of those things, those are all refused. There are some people who are married to Bahamians, and there's some suggestion that there's a kind of racket going on with that as well. So there's been an increased heightened sensitivity with regard to that, where people get married to Bahamians and therefore have a spousal permit. The spousal permit allows you to work anywhere and to live in the Bahamas, but it does not allow you to fish because fishing is reserved for Bahamians. Notwithstanding the fact that you have the spousal permit, the law does not permit non-Bahamians to fish for commercial reasons. So where that is occurring, the advice I have is it is unlawful and it should not be occurring, and steps should be taken to deal with it. And part of what I have to say today will be about some additional steps that we propose with regard to immigration to try and effect to try and change what is happening with regard to immigration, the impact this is having on the society, its destabilization. It is central also to the fight against crime because of the criminal elements that are involved in smuggling people into this country and into other countries. I had announced about 4 to 6 weeks ago that the government was considering some additional measures to deal with this issue, and I'd like to just say what those proposals are. But I would like to say, and not joining issue with the member from Montague, but to, I suppose, join in a common purpose, which is at the substratum of all of this, no fight against crime can be successful if it does not have the support of the society. I agree, I believe in what he said in this sense, that you can pass all the laws you want. You can pass whatever, design whatever policies and procedures you want, unless you have the support, and I would add the discipline of a society to enforce those laws, then it will be of no effect. And so the real issue for the Bahamas is whether the people of the Bahamas have the discipline. And I hear all this talk, for example, about immigration, what the immigration minister ought to do and not do, and what immigration officers ought to do and not do, and what the police ought to do and not do, and what the Royal Bahamas Defense Force ought to do and not do. But it really is not them. I mean, they're at the front line. But if the people of the country undercut whatever the efforts are of the government of the country to design policies and to enforce the law, then it's of no effect. It's absolutely useless. And what you find, in my experience with immigration, is that that is precisely what is happening. People say, on the one hand, that they want the immigration laws to be enforced, but on the other hand, undercut that very enforcement by the selective application of the enforcement for particular individuals. They say, you know, in the aggregate, you must do this, but not for the person who's associated with me. And so we have to get to the point where we are actually committed to doing that. What I like about the way the mover of this motion, what he did today, was he didn't come with a lot of drama over these amendments. I remember when we were in the previous term, the term 2007-2012, they'd come with these little amendments to the act, and then there would be these major debates as if some huge thing was going to happen as a result, for example, of reducing the jury from 12 to 9. And this was supposed to be a major anti-crime plank. As we now know that reducing the jury from 12 to 9 has made not one single bit of difference to fighting crime. Not one single bit of difference. What we know is that you can make incremental changes to meet various changes that occur in the society. And so the Bail Act clearly is in need of amendment. The Coroner's Act, I think it was a mistake taking out the power, the summary power of the magistrate to be able to commit people for offenses for which they had been found liable. I thought that was a mistake. So this is designed to put that back in. I think that's the right thing to do. We know that the courts have been complaining loudly about the mandatory minimum sentences to the point where there is a law in the book saying, for example, I think with the drug offenses that the minimum is 4 years, but the Court of Appeal has been routinely setting aside the 4 years, saying it is wrong and it's up to the courts to be able to decide on the circumstances of each particular case what the penalty ought to be. And at one point, the Attorney General's office showed up in the Court of Appeal, and they were tongue-lashed by the judges, saying, look, we told you fellas to go and get this changed. Why is this law not changed? Why is it still here? And so this change is designed to do that. And of course, the Evidence Amendment Bill or Act, when it becomes law, is designed to be able to deal with the upgrade in technology which we now face, and also for the protection of witnesses. And these are all designed to deal with the present-day events which we face. And one of those we saw played out in the newspapers this morning, where there was the death of another young man in Fox Hill. And I read the quote from one of the relatives who said, "The system has failed me," because she believed, and I don't know what the facts are, she believed that the individual who's responsible for this was actually released on bail, and he had been charged with another homicide. So now we have another death. And Prime Minister, I didn't get the opportunity to say this to you, but we brought urban renewal as an intervention program when we saw about 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, a tit-for-tat set of killings taking place in Fox Hill, and usually it happened every 6 months or so. And we find now that we're back in this cycle again. And the thing that struck me was that on Saturday, I had, as a representative, I have actually never been through a day like Saturday, where I had 7 funerals to go to. 7 funerals. For me, I think it certainly is. I mean, I was completely whacked out by the time the day was over. And after that was done, there was a birthday party that I had to go to, thankfully by the invitation of Reverend Julia Bain, to celebrate the 100th birthday of Ms. Gwen Clark, who's a resident of the Fox Hill area. And I want to begin to talk a little bit about that, because it was wonderful. The former Prime Minister himself showed up to the event. But what was wonderful about it was, here was a lady with her full faculties at 100 years of age. And she got a letter from Her Majesty the Queen congratulating her on the anniversary of her birth. And the community turned out in force, and they were all her grandchildren and great-grandchildren and the leaders of the church. And I always think to myself, here is a lady who's seen a lot of change from 1914 to 2014. That's a lot of change. I mean, the first airplane, electricity coming to the country, the first car. She saw all of those things take place, things that we all take for granted. And she's had a wonderful life. She says she still cooks her own food every day. She even bakes bread. She says she doesn't share the bread because she's not sure the recipe comes out right every time. But she eats her own bread. So she even has a great sense of humor. And so it was just a wonderful experience to be there and experience that. And then you contrast that to people taking away life that can last for 100 years, taking it away over silliness at the age of 20 and 21 and 16 and 27. And you ask yourself, what the heck is going on with these folk? And you know, what can you do to actually interrupt in a social sense? And as I say, with this particular event, on Saturday, in between one of the funerals, someone from the neighborhood came up to me and said, look, I need to talk to you because I hear something is about to go down and you need to do something to intervene. As events turned out, it just got by me. And then I saw the headlines the next morning and I said, you know, Holy Father, now what? So we, again, have to redouble our efforts to try and intervene to see if we can put a stop to this cycle of death and destruction against individuals. And I put it down again to the society's discipline and our committing ourselves to this discipline and fighting this scourge. My late uncle-in-law, Wenzel Granger, used to be the Deputy Commissioner of Police a long time ago, in the days of Sir Albert Miller on the force. He was married to my father's sister, Ruth. She was a teacher at the Eastern Senior School under Donald Davis. He was a very, and this is the milieu within which I was raised, he was a very strict individual as a police officer. There was a rule in the police force that civilians were not allowed to be picked up in the official car which was provided for him as Deputy Commissioner of Police. He had a driver, and the driver could take him wherever he wanted to go, and also once a family member was with him could use the car. But the rule was the car was not supposed to be used to pick up relatives. One day, his driver was coming up East Street, and it was pouring rain, and he saw Mrs. Granger walking up the street in the rain. So he pulled to the side of the road and collected Mrs. Granger and dropped her to the barracks where they lived. He was promptly put on a charge. And the police officer was incredulous. So he asked, well, why am I put on the charge? And Mr. Granger said to him, well, the rule is what? No civilians are supposed to be collected in the car. So he said, but it was raining and Mrs. Granger was walking. He said, is she a civilian or is she not? Mm-hmm. Is she a civilian or is she not? And that's so the rule is what it is. And that's the kind of, I mean, that may seem to be overly strict, but that's the kind of dedication and commitment to the rules and the kind of society we ought to have if things are going to be raised properly, that there are rules and there are consequences. I said, Mr. Speaker, I was just talking to the Minister for the Public Service, and I say again what I said last week. The greatest contribution, I think, that we will be able to make to the development of this Bahamas is if we get to a stage where, when we leave office, we can say without doubt that anybody who comes in, once they give an instruction to the public administration, that instruction gets carried out in a timely fashion with courtesy and directness. There's simply too much, back and forth, and you don't know when it's going to happen, and no tracking, and so on and so forth. And I don't actually know where this comes from. But a modern country cannot continue unless we get that under control. And what happens is that, so what it does is it tends to breed a black market, because the only way you can get it attended to is if you stop the Prime Minister in the road and say, I applied for this and I haven't heard anything. And then he's got to go scrambling around to the minister, and the minister's got to find this, and so on and so forth. When, if things are dealt with as a matter of routine, it will simply get done. Within a short period of time, any application you make, you know it goes through the system and you'll get the service which you demand. That's the point to which we are seeking to get. And that, I think, would be important to reach it. Mr. Speaker, immigration is one of the more vexing issues related to this question of the breaking of our laws. And so what we are now proposing is that with immediate effect, we will not be accepting in the Department of Immigration applications for people who do not have legal status in the Bahamas to work, and anyone who comes to do so, the application will be refused and the applicant will be arrested and charged and deported. So you can't just jump off a boat with your wet feet and come into the Immigration Department and apply for a work permit. If you get in there, you're going to be caught, arrested, and deported, and employers should not come with applications with anyone who does not have status in the Bahamas. Do not do so. We're also considering, and this is being put out for public comment, a permanent prospective ban on all people who have come here illegally and have been deported, so that they may not ever be able to qualify for permanent status in the Bahamas. Okay? So we are considering a permanent prospective ban on all people who have come here illegally and have been deported, so that prospectively they will not be able to qualify for permanent status in the Bahamas. We're allowing a period of comment before proceeding with a formal proposal in this regard. And the intention, if I had my way, is to have new regulations and policies in place by the 1st of January 2015. But with effect from the 1st of November, new procedures are to come into force with regard to work permit procedures, and it is envisaged that the regulations will be amended and the policies accordingly. Those new regulations have already been approved by the Cabinet. The suggestions are out for comment. Meetings have been held with various stakeholders, including the Haitian ambassador and the leaders of the Haitian community. They are expected to meet again with the leaders of the country, both the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. But the proposal is that as of the 1st of November 2014, employers who wish to apply for first-time work permit holders, that is, persons with no status in the Bahamas, who are from the Republic of Haiti, will have to do the following. First, come to the Immigration Department and pay the processing fee of $100, provide the labor certificate, the cover letter, the stamp tax of $30, and the employee information sheet in Nassau. That information will be forwarded to the Embassy of the Bahamas in Port-au-Prince, where the individual applicant will fill out the application form and provide the supporting documents. The individual applicant must be certified as personally seen by an embassy officer in Port-au-Prince. I also wish to announce that we will, as of November the 1st, require all persons who live in the Bahamas to have a passport of the country of their nationality. Those people who have been born here will get a particular residence permit, which will allow them to work and live here until such time as their status pursuant to any application under the terms of the Constitution is decided. This will allow access of children to the schools. This will not apply to the children of people who are here illegally. I say again, this will not apply to the children of those who are here illegally. The Haitian president and the ambassador have confirmed that they will be able to meet the demand for these passports. The holding of a foreign passport does not prejudice the right of anyone under the Constitution to apply for citizenship of the Bahamas. In addition, it is proposed that as of the 1st of November to end the practice of issuing certificates of identity to non-nationals born here. These will only be for Bahamians who have a need for an emergency travel document or where, in accordance with our international obligations, we are to issue them to non-nationals. Again, these matters are now in the public domain for comment. The idea is to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that people who are in the Bahamas are properly documented and have the proper permission to live in the Bahamas. The situation with immigration in the Bahamas is most vexing. The new class of recruits should graduate at the end of October. I think there'll be 60 in that class. A new class has been chosen and will begin shortly thereafter. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force is working actively on the high seas. The level of interdictions on land is ongoing. There is so much criminality involved in immigration that these new rules and procedures are necessary in order to get on top of this problem. And I'll tell you one example we've heard, Mr. Speaker. The public officials in my recent visit to Abaco told me that in some cases, public officials are going into areas where they are being resisted by people who are non-nationals to come into these areas. If that is so, that is unacceptable. Public officials of the Bahamas government go into areas where non-nationals live, and people resist the appearance of those public officials. That is an essence to the challenge of our sovereignty, and that will not stand, and it will be brought to heel. It will be brought to heel. It cannot happen in this country. This requires, however, Mr. Speaker, the efforts of all Bahamians to guard our borders and protect our country. And I'm particularly concerned about the situation in Abaco and in Eleuthera, where special attention is being paid to both those islands, where many residents believe that things have gotten totally out of hand. It is important for us to address it before it becomes an issue, particularly this issue of some areas being no-go areas for public officials. It cannot stand and has to be stopped. Mr. Speaker, I thought that the debate on these bills was a convenient opportunity to send that message out to the country. Sovereignty means that you have control over your national territory to the extent that your resources permit. It means that you are able to defend this country from incursions from the outside which will undermine that sovereignty and our territorial integrity. This country cannot be undermined by the drip, drip, drip of people who get on wooden boats and come to our country and then slip into communities and melt away in the dark. That's not acceptable. When people come to this country, they must come in through the front door with visas where those visas are required and where the laws permit. Once people do that in a country that requires labor from outside, then I think Bahamians have no problem. What they do not want is their country undermined and their sovereignty worn away in this fashion. It is something which cannot stand. Communities in New Providence, Bahamians in New Providence, should not support illegal activity, should not support the coming in of these individuals who are undermining our sovereignty in that way, and should join with the public officials, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Department of Immigration and Customs, in this fight to make sure that our borders are secure. There's so many implications. When you are able to undercut labor costs, for example, this drives unemployment. So we have to have control of it because our people need work. They need to be properly trained. And you can't have people coming from the outside undermining this right to work. You can't do it. It becomes a security risk. We are conscious of our obligations, our international obligations in this regard. And there is no way that we are going to step away from whatever those obligations are. There's also the common humanity, which has to be extended to anyone who is in distress. That also is a part of the rubric of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. But look at the expenses, which we have $1.5 million set aside for repatriation. And if you look at what was spent from January the 1st, 2014 to June 2014, and you put that together, that's $963,000. You put that together with what was spent from the 1st of July to the 12th of September, that's $245,000. So, up to January, from January to September, this country has spent $1.2 million on repatriating people from this country. Because that is $1.2 million that could be spent in other productive activities. In terms of the foreign nationals apprehended up to the 31st of August 2014, 3,853 people have been interdicted since the start of the year. And repatriation is slightly less, 2,876. So this is a tremendous cost on us. And the Bahamian public is dissatisfied with the state of this. Now, I'm not saying, sir, that these rules will change this. What I am saying is the rules are designed to help to bring these changes about, but we need the support of the Bahamian people. Thank you. I commend the bills.